Wouldn't it be amazing if you could hear any jazz song and almost instantly know what the chords are? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna go over the exact strategies that the pros use to learn hundreds of jazz songs by only learning a few of them. Let's get to it. All right, so take a look at this song called Autumn Leaves, very common jazz standard. And to understand how pros are going about learning tunes and being able to hear them almost instantaneously, we have to understand some core strategies, right? So taking a look at Autumn Leaves, you can see that we've color coded this. There's two keys that we're really dealing with Autumn Leaves. It's concert B flat major and it's concert G minor, okay? Now, for the sake of Autumn Leaves, we have two flats, which could either mean it's in the key of B flat major or the key of G minor. In this case, it's actually in the key of G minor because it continuously resolves to that key center. Now, it's important that you pay attention to this color coding here and the fact that I just outlined the two key centers that we're dealing with, because truly this is how the pros are thinking about learning songs. They're not really looking at every single chord here individually and going, well, I need to memorize every single chord. That would be a very inefficient way to go about it and not the best strategy for learning hundreds of songs. Instead, they're compartmentalizing different patterns that emerge in jazz songs and the way those patterns actually sound. Here's what I mean. So the first three chords of Autumn Leaves are C minor 7, F7, and B flat major 7, okay? And that's this part of the melody. Right? So C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7. Now, as you can see below here, we've labeled this a 2-5-1 of the relative major. So a 2-5-1 is the most common chord progression, or let's call it a pattern, that emerges in jazz music. And here we have a great example of what's called a major 2-5-1. A major 2-5-1 starts with a minor 7th chord, with the 5 chord being a dominant 7th chord, and the 1 chord being some kind of major 7th chord. So when we're thinking about learning Autumn Leaves, we're not really thinking about C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7. What we're really doing is thinking, all right, B flat major 7 is the first key center we resolve to, and it is resolved to by a 2-5-1. Now you might be thinking, okay, well that's still a lot to think about. That's still a lot to memorize. You have to memorize that it's a 2-5-1. But in reality, again, jazz musicians, pro jazz musicians are relating patterns like this to sounds that they are hearing. So when you go about learning Autumn Leaves, right, you hear the sounds of this 2-5-1, right? And you might hear it play in a bunch of different ways. And you start hearing not only the bass movement, right, going like this, but you also hear harmonic resolutions, right, to these chords. And before you know it, you start to recognize these sounds so that when you put a name to it like 2-5-1, really the name becomes less important as much as the recognition of the sound when you hear it in the first place. So if you had never heard Autumn Leaves before, but someone told you, okay, B flat major is the first key center that you're resolving to in the song, then if you listen to it just the first time and you hear, right, this sound, you automatically can understand, oh, we resolve to it through a 2-5-1. Looking ahead here, we have this second key center highlighted in red. That's G minor, right? And once again, if you look at how we resolve to this G minor 7, it's a minor 2-5-1. And a minor 2-5-1 is always a half diminished chord, all right? So a minor 7 flat 5 chord, followed by a dominant 7th chord, right, of some sort, to a minor 7th chord. So half diminished, dominant, and then minor 7. So obviously this is some fundamental understanding of chords and how to build chord progressions. But again, the thought process is memorizing each chord individually. It's thinking about the pattern there, right? Once again, the bass lines move in the same way that in a major 2-5-1 they would move. And you might also recognize that these are actually moving in fourth intervals, right? And so that's another pattern that actually comes up in jazz all of the time. So when you learn jazz songs, you hear these sounds, you see the fourth movements going throughout tunes. And once you've learned it once, right, once you've learned just Autumn Leaves, you start to see these patterns so much in other jazz standards that pretty soon your ear is just defaulting to them. So the memorization process gets exponentially easier as we learn more songs. Now, before going forward, if you're like, hey, Brent, I have zero clue what you're talking about with 2-5-1s and half diminished chords, and music theory is just way over my head. Well, I have something for you completely free. It's my Jazz Theory Made Easy fast track guide. I'll leave that down in the description down below. Really just goes over the basics of jazz theory, cutting all the fat. You don't need to know a bunch of stuff, and really will get you started on the right foot, help make all this sound like amateur stuff, all right? So check out that guide for free, leave it down in the description down below. Okay, so understanding this about Autumn Leaves, let's go to a much more complicated tune, like All the Things You Are, okay? All the Things You Are sounds like this. The reason I played that melody for you is because that's the next thing that pro jazz musicians are super in tune to, is an understanding of the melody of a song, right? And this starts literally just by listening a lot. That's why in our Inner Circle membership, where we learn one new jazz standard a month, one of the things we really focus on is playlists of these songs, where we'll have like 20 to 30 different versions of one song, like All the Things You Are, so that our members can listen to this song over and over and over again, right? To really hear that melody so that it just becomes singable, right? Understanding that melody, how it fits into the time, hearing it with the harmony going on, right? That's where we start making these connections. And so if you have a familiarity with the melody of a song, whether you actually know how to play it on your instrument or not, this helps you relate the chords so much better. So with that in mind, let's talk again about patterns, right? So with All the Things You Are, there's actually 5 different key centers here, right? You can kind of see with all the different color coding. We have A flat major as a resolution, C major is a resolution, E flat major is a resolution, G major is a resolution point, and finally, E major is a resolution point in this song. That's a lot of key center changes. So that makes it seem like, wow, this is a very complicated song. How do you memorize it? Because looking through this, right, especially if you're not a jazz musician, you're like, look at all of these chords. This is a lot of chords to memorize. But again, in reality, we're really just thinking about 5 key centers and how do we actually get there? Well, once again, we're really in luck because in jazz, the same patterns emerge over and over again. So ignoring this F minor 7 for a second, look here and we have a 2-5-1 chord progression in A flat major, right? And ready, you can hear that pattern again, right? You probably, just from us working on Autumn Leaves for just a little bit, you can hear that 2-5-1 pattern happening, right? Now over here, a little bit further with the C major 7, we have a 5-1 pattern. So we're skipping the 2. So we have this 5-2-1, right? But even just that pattern, the 5-1, that's something that we can hear very easily over and over and over again. Going ahead, 2-5-1 in E flat major, 2-5-1 in G major, right? And so while these are different keys, right? This is E flat major and this is G major, the pattern still sounds the same. So it's almost like the only thing you have to memorize is what chord do I start on, right? So in this case, it's F minor 7, which happens to be the 6th chord, right? So it starts with an F minor 7, then it goes to a 6, 2-5-1. So F minor 6, 2-5-1. We see that happen again here in bar 9, right? So we have the 6th chord. Again, this is the 6th chord C minor in E flat major, and it goes 6-2-5-1. Right? So a lot of the same kind of chordal movements are actually happening throughout this song. And another important thing to note is, once again, these are all moving in fourths. Like this 6th chord to the 2 chord is a 4th, to the 5 chord is a 4th, to the 1 chord is a 4th, right? And even here to these 4 chord, the D flat major is a 4th movement before it switches to a new key center. Now combine this understanding of the melody, right? And you're able to hear that first melody note line up on top of that first chord, right? And that next chord lining up on the 2. Over the 5. right, over the 1. You can hear that melody playing out. Again, this is less of something that a pro jazz musician is thinking about, but more patterns that have been internalized and sounds that they're actually hearing in real time that become automatic, like as if you're just tying your shoe. Now let's check out a much simpler jazz standard, Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, okay? This one, as you can see, a lot less colors going on. In fact, really all we have here is C minor 7 and E flat major 7. So this song is in the key of C minor, and it really just kind of hangs out in C minor. It goes 1, then a 2, 5, 1, and then a 2, 5, 1, and then it just keeps going. So that's like the whole A section here of Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. So really, we're just thinking about this 1 and then minor 2, 5, 1s. And here, that pattern of the 2, 5, 1. So if you were to hear that for the first time, but really know that minor 2, 5, 1, just like we saw back here in Autumn Leaves, right? This minor 2, 5, 1 to G minor, then you start to be able to hear the same thing going on in Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. Now, when we get to E flat major here in the B section of Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, right? There's actually some different patterns that we haven't seen before that aren't these fourth movement 2, 5, 1 kinds of chord progressions, right? Where we have this E flat major 1 chord that goes to this flat 2 diminished, E diminished 7th, right? So it's like E flat major 7 to E diminished 7, and then it goes down to F minor 7, G flat diminished 7, and then G7, right? So really what we have is this chromatic movement, right? Like this. Now, that might seem complicated to wrap your ear around if you're not familiar with it, but the more you explore jazz standards, such as another song like Have You Met Miss Jones, you'll hear this, what we call chromatic passing chords, and diminished 7th chords in jazz are often what we call chromatic passing chords. So it's really a connecting chord from E flat major to F minor 7 in this particular case, right? This chromatic approach sound. And once you hear this sound, right, you start to get that in your ear and it doesn't become so unfamiliar. And you're, oh, okay, I know what that sounds like right here. Also, if you dig more into theory, right, then you understand that actually these chromatic passing chords are really just substitutions for 5 chords, right? So instead of, for example, going a 5 to the F minor 7, a C7 to the F minor 7, it's actually a substitution there of the chromatic diminished chord going to the F minor 7. All that aside, and not to be overcomplicating things, you start to hear that pattern, and this is how jazz musicians are able to hear these things almost right away and go, oh, I know exactly what's happening here. To prove my point a little bit further, let's look at It Could Happen to You. Super common jazz standard here. And once again, E flat major, which is a familiar key in jazz. We have 2, 5, 1s, right? Here, 2, 5, 1 to the F minor 7, a minor 2, 5, 1 here. All over the place, there's these fourth movement, 2, 5, 1 chord progressions. And yeah, the occasional thing that's a little bit different about the tune, right? But even over here, right, you can kind of hear this F minor 7. It goes like this to an A flat minor 6 to an E flat major 7. Once you hear that sound and you get familiar with what that actually sounds like, the next time you hear that come up with another jazz standard, you're that much more familiar with that sound and what's actually happening. When you do this over and over and over again, this is how you build up your ears to the point where you can hear chords right away. You know the melodies super well, you can hear the patterns super well. Even if you don't know what the key of the song is in, you could figure it out pretty quickly. And this is how a pro jazz musician either instantaneously or can quickly learn 5 to 10 songs, right, within a short period of time because they're so familiar with the harmony. So what's the best way to go about doing that? Is it learning a bunch of jazz songs at once? No. The best strategy actually is to learn one song at a time and really dive deep into the harmony, kind of like we've done here today, looking at this chords analysis, understanding the theory, yes, but connecting the sounds together, really diving deep into the melody. How does the melody relate to the chords? And so when you gain that kind of intimate familiarity with one song, that's how you start making every other song infinitely easier to learn because of the work that you put into one song and the patterns that just continuously emerge time and time again in other jazz standards. So my friends, again, we have our free guide, the Jazz Theory Made Easy Fast Track Guide. Leave that in the description down below or up here on the screen if all this theory has kind of crowded your brain a little bit. Well, this will make it really easy, so definitely check that out. Also, if you're interested in learning one new jazz standard a month with us, we do that in our Learn Jazz Standards Inner Circle membership. Would love to have you come join us over there. Really a lot of fun, and we really do exactly what I just talked about today. If you found this video helpful, please like it, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.